They just swept, in 4 games, the American League champions. And while they did it in 3 of the 4 games by the skin of their teeth, 2 extra innings wins, 1 come-from-behind victory, the poise, toughness, all these things that they've been able to show all season long really has been remarkable and never any better than it was over the weekend, to the point where my mom, the beloved Kitsy, who is a Tampa Bay Rays fan along with my stepdad, they do exist. I lived in St. Petersburg, Florida, like about a mile and a half away from the stadium where the Rays play for quite some time, and my mom adopted them as her team when she moved down there. She called me yesterday, like mad. She's mad that the Rays lost 4 to the Mariners. And then she started asking me, wait, are the Mariners, are they good? Are they going to make the playoffs? And then I started thinking to myself, well, that's probably unrealistic. And I don't want to, I don't want to all of a sudden, pull the rug out from underneath all this optimism and excitement. Really, I am blown away by what they did. And you should be too. And you should remember this in the coming weeks when there likely will be a bit of a regression to the mean. But when I hear this from Ryan Divish, who was on Danny Gallant when I was out yesterday with Michael Bumpus, this got me pretty excited too.
You have to be a competitive person to get to the big leagues because it's hard. But this team with these guys, it's one of the more competitive teams and more intense teams I've been around. JP, Mitch Haniger, like I used to call him a cyborg because he wasn't human. He didn't seem to enjoy baseball because he took it so seriously. Marco, these guys are so competitive. And Danny, I think if you remember, the first team I ever covered on an almost daily basis was the 2008 team that lost 101 games, and it was the biggest collection of jerks and miscreants and just guys playing out the string. And to see this and to see what they have now, it's so different, and it's kind of refreshing.
I love Divish, first off. Second off, that is the different element of this team, and this is good. This is the good dynamic of a process, and it is the most interactive sports talk show in Seattle. And in the last segment, I talked about how I think it's good that Joel Embiid basically threw his teammate under the bus because Ben Simmons needs to be gone, and the Sixers need to move on from their idea of the process. Someone texted in, Paul, if that's your take on the process, tell me how what the Mariners are doing is a different strategy. You're seeing it in action right there in that there is the toughness. This team does not have yet all of the talent that you're expecting them to have. It's just not here yet. You're hoping it'll be here someday, and there's no guarantee that it will be. But in Philadelphia, and I think that the Sixers have a lot of loser juice in them, a lot of that loser DNA. When they were losing, it was acceptable. And there was nobody there to hold everybody else necessarily accountable. And I think it translated into some of the playoff runs over the last couple of years where you look at them and you say, wow, they have Joel Embiid. Wow, they also have Ben Simmons. And yet here's Jimmy Butler playing with this team. And Butler's a bit of a hardo and a pain in the butt to play with. He's looking at them and he's like, these guys there's no edge. There's no competitive edge here. At the very least, there is some semblance of that here. That does not guarantee anything when it comes to the actual long-term prospects of this team. But I do think that is a key thing that you need to have, and not every team has it. And hearing that from Ryan Divish really got me excited yesterday. So since it is the most interactive sports talk show in Seattle, this is my question for you. Can the Mariners legitimately top what they did this past weekend against the Tampa Bay Rays over the course of the rest of the year? And give me a realistic way in which they can do it. Some people tweeted in @GallantSays an answer to that question. You can also text it in, 710-710, on the Mac and Jack's Brewing Company text line. Richard Judd tweeted, they will make an impressive trade to try and compete for the wild card. Some crazy Jerry trade where we are the third team, don't really give up that much, and wind up landing an all-star. But that's not an on-the-field accomplishment. And I think that sort of gets us back to the point where we are really wondering, what can they do necessarily better? Kyle Lewis Stan tweets in, nope, they're going to win the World Series, so it's fine. Jay Fott, make the playoffs. Josh Oster, win a playoff series. But Ryan Widmeyer, and I think this is what you should be looking for at this point, no matter how exciting this past weekend was, finishing above 500. That's honestly what you should be looking for and hoping for. Because at this point, if you look at the ladder that they have to climb up, to actually get into playoff contention, it's going to be really, really hard. So they're 5.5 back of the top 2 wildcard teams, Oakland and Tampa Bay. But those 2 teams are neck and neck in division races with Houston and with Boston, respectively. Then after that, you can't forget about the New York Yankees, who are underachieving like crazy this year. You would think at some point they would figure it out. The Chicago White Sox are arguably the best team in baseball, and Cleveland's respectable. So there's basically 7 teams ahead of you in the 5-team playoff structure of the American League. And I would say just about all of them outside of Cleveland have way more resources than you. So with that in mind, if you're the Mariners, what do you do come trade deadline? And, man, there's a part of me that even though I see the idea of them creeping up those wild card rankings and actually finding themselves in playoff contention is very unrealistic. I've been sort of talking myself into the idea of being aggressive at the trade deadline. And by the way, I don't think that's something that's going to happen. Jerry DiPoto, when he joined Danny and Gallant with me out this past Thursday, he said that when it comes to Mitch Haniger extending him, something that I've been pushing for, which I feel like would be good both for the short term and long term for the Mariners, sounds like he might be a possible candidate for trade.
We're always open to thoughts like that with Mitch or other players. It's something we've used as in the past, whether it be with Marco, whether it be with guys like Evan White. It's something that we have been aggressive with, even with some players who are no longer here. You know, we did an extension with Gene Segura. We're open to doing things like that. And that has to be a marriage on both sides. So while I can say that that's something that we as a club consider for anybody, it's a matter of the fit, the length and the cost. It's always what it's about for both sides. And we'll be open to considering that. And I'm sure Mitch will too.
So they're open for it. But when you listen back to that, do you feel like they are that gung-ho about extending Mitch Haniger? I don't hear it. That might change, I guess. But then think about it. If you don't extend him, well, what do? Come trade deadline, that might make you a seller when it comes to Haniger. And the thing is, you're not really going to upgrade by trading Haniger, at least in the short term. You trade Haniger, you're going to get some prospects. And I know that some people would like to, and you continue to load up on prospects, and all of a sudden you might have a bunch of them coming up at the same time, in addition to the guys that you already feel pretty good about. That would be J.P. Crawford, Ty France, and after that we'll see if Kyle Lewis's health is something that will straighten itself out in the years ahead. But, it's something that you definitely have to be a little bit nervous about. But there is a part of me that's been talking myself into the idea of this. It might be crazy, because if you trade for a short-term rental with the idea of potentially deciding that you'll extend him, and honestly, if you trade for a short-term rental, you should extend him. I'm wondering if that maybe gives you the inside track on landing a guy long-term, like a real major league player, a real stud, star, guy who is better than anyone you have on your roster. And what it would take to get one like that, it's probably all of your prospects not named Jared Kelenic, Julio Rodriguez. All of those guys would be on the table. And I don't think you should say no to the idea of that immediately, because you don't know what some of these guys are going to be when they come up to the major leagues. And I know, Cal Raleigh, he plays catcher. It's hard to find good catchers. It's hard to find catchers who hit. And that maybe Cal Raleigh is one of those guys that you're looking at right now and you're saying, yep, this guy's long-term future for us. But if Cal Raleigh gets you something awesome in return that you know is good right now, and that you have a feel like if you're going to finally start spending, you feel like you have a really good chance of extending the guy during the offseason, is that something you would consider doing, or are you just going to wait? I don't think you should say no to the idea altogether just yet.